Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're doing something a little different, but I think really insightful. We're taking just one source, a monthly magazine, and we're going to unpack the, well, frankly astonishing breadth of knowledge inside it. Our mission, like always, is to pull out the most important nuggets, the surprising facts, and give you that shortcut to being genuinely well-informed.
Exactly. And our source today is an issue of Awake magazine from April 2013. It's published by Jehovah's Witnesses.
Mhm.
And just to give you a sense of scale, this single issue had a massive distribution, something like 43.5 million copies,
Yes.
98 languages.
Wow, that's huge.
It really is. And what's fascinating, and what we'll explore, is how a publication like this weaves together such, well, diverse topics. You get everything from really deeply personal struggles to, global events and even scientific observations. It's quite a mix.
Okay, let's jump right in then. Section 1, the human condition, focusing on relationships and communication. And we start with a topic that's unfortunately a disturbing reality for many domestic violence. The magazine presents this stark contrast. Picture Frank. Charming, kind in public, especially with his wife Isabel's parents, seems perfect.
Right. The ideal husband outwardly.
But then, scene 2, Frank boiling with rage, hitting Isabel, kicking her, pulling her hair, even knocking her head against the wall. And here's where it gets really interesting. Or maybe chilling is the better word. Both scenarios, they're about the same couple, Frank and Isabel.
It's a powerful illustration of that hidden reality, the two-personality situation, as the article puts it. And it highlights how prevalent this is. I mean, in the U.S. alone, one survey found, get this, an average of over 16 calls a minute to domestic violence hotlines.
16 a minute? That's staggering.
It is. And the magazine stresses this is a worldwide issue, crossing all social, economic lines. Plus, so many incidents go unrecorded. It does clarify that while men can be victims too, in most reported cases, the perpetrators are men.
Which leads to that really complex, often heartbreaking question. Why don't they just leave? The article goes into several common reasons. There's the fear, the sheer terror of things getting worse if they try to leave, threats of harm, even death.
Absolutely. Fear is a huge factor.
And then there's social alienation, like Isabel in that story. When she did leave, her own sister and the whole neighborhood shunned her. She had to move away.
So isolation, even after escaping.
Exactly. Plus, wanting kids to have both parents, huge financial worries, victims wrongly blaming themselves, and sometimes just shame or this maybe lingering hope that things will somehow get better.
It's such a complex trap. On the separation and divorce angle, the publication explains its specific religious viewpoint. Basically, it cites adultery as the primary ground for divorce based on Scripture. But importantly, it does acknowledge that extreme situations, like severe physical abuse, might lead someone to separate for their own safety. It recognizes that reality.
That Frank and Isabel story is deeply unsettling. It really makes you wonder if change is even possible in situations like that. And the magazine actually follows up with a case study in transformation, Troy and Valerie. Their story starts out incredibly grim.
Yeah, it's harrowing. Troy had this history of extreme violence, pistol whipping Valerie,
Yeah.
beating her so badly he thought he'd killed her once. He even threatened their young son with a knife.
Unbelievable. And Valerie said something powerful, that the verbal abuse, the constant insults and criticism was actually harder to endure than the physical violence.
That really stands out, doesn't it? The article gives some context on Troy's background growing up, seeing his father beat his mother, and later violence from his mother's partner. But Troy himself is quoted emphasizing that none of that excuses his own actions.
Right. So, okay, let's unpack this. What was the turning point? How did things change?
Well, Valerie started studying the Bible with Jehovah's Witnesses. Initially, this made Troy worse, more jealous, more violent.
Oh, wow. Not the reaction you'd hope for.
No. But then their son, Daniel, ended up in the hospital. And the witnesses, the very people Troy had been hostile towards, showed incredible kindness. They helped care for their daughter, stayed with Daniel at the hospital. This genuine kindness, it really affected Troy deeply. It started to break through.
So that act of kindness was the catalyst.
It seems so. He then started studying the Bible himself. The magazine points to specific principles he learned and applied. Things like showing his wife honor, as the scripture puts it, cultivating mildness and self-control.
Key qualities, clearly lacking before.
Definitely. And condemning abusive speech, linking back to Valerie's point. He also came to believe that God saw everything he did, even privately. And crucially, he changed his associations, realizing, bad associations spoil useful habits, as another scripture says.
So a combination of learning new principles and changing his environment and the outcome.
Quite remarkable, according to the article. 25 years later, Troy is described as genuinely loving, kind, considerate. A complete turnaround. Valerie's advice looking back is interesting too. She says, don't just compare your situation to others or blindly follow all advice. She's glad she didn't just throw her marriage away.
That's a powerful story of change. It really emphasizes the potential for transformation, even from extreme circumstances.
It does. It suggests that really deep-seated patterns, even violent ones, can be overcome. It involves commitment to new principles, finding support, maybe experiencing unexpected kindness.
And Valerie's comment about words hitting harder than fists, that really stuck with me. It leads us straight into the next part, the power of words themselves.
Yes, a crucial point. The magazine explores why people use hurtful speech. Sometimes it's learned you repeat what you heard growing up in your family.
Makes sense. Learned behavior.
Right, or the influence of entertainment. You know, comedies making rude or sarcastic speech seem funny or harmless. And sometimes cultural attitudes play a part, like those outdated ideas about real men being domineering or women needing to be aggressive to be heard.
And the consequences? Not good, I assume.
No. The article links hurtful speech to higher chances of divorce and even various health problems. Stress, anxiety, that kind of thing.
Okay, so it identifies the problem and the causes. Does it offer solutions, how to break that pattern?
Yes, it does. It gives 5 pretty practical steps, often tied back to those Bible principles we mentioned.
Let's hear them.
Okay, first, show empathy. Really try to put yourself in your spouse's shoes. It quotes a proverb. An answer, when mild, turns away rage.
De-escalation through understanding.
Exactly. Second, observe respectful couples. If your own role models weren't great, find positive examples to imitate.
Learn by watching others. Good advice.
Third, revive shared feelings. Nurture positive thoughts about your partner. Remember good times. It makes the point that hurtful speech is often a problem of the heart more than of the mouth.
So focus on the underlying feelings. Okay.
Fourth, use I statements. Talk about how you feel or how you are affected by something instead of launching accusations like you always or you never.
Less attacking, more explaining your own perspective.
Right. Keep the lines of communication open, not defensive. And finally, fifth, know when to stop. If things get heated, agree to pause the discussion. Walk away before it blows up, as another proverb suggests.
Step back, cool down. Very practical. It also mentioned a distinction about abusive speech.
Yes, an interesting linguistic point. It draws on the original Greek words. Screaming is just raising your voice. But abusive speech, blasphemia in Greek, is about the content malicious, demeaning, insulting words, even if they're spoken quietly.
So it's the malice, not just the volume. That's a key insight for communication. Okay, let's shift gears a bit. From those intense personal dynamics, the magazine zooms out to offer this wider view in a section called Watching the World. Some surprising snapshots here.
Yeah, it's quite eclectic. For example, in the U.S., during Hurricane Sandy in 2012, you might expect crime to spike, right?
Yeah, chaos, opportunity.
Well, in New York City, murders, felony assaults, robberies actually declined. An NYPD spokesperson said that often happens after major disasters. People pull together, maybe. Though, interestingly, burglaries did increase because of looting in areas that lost power.
Huh. A mixed bag, then. Fascinating. What else?
Antarctica. Its unique ecology is apparently under threat from invasive species. Tens of thousands of visitors, tourists, scientists, and they inadvertently carry seeds on their clothes and gear, an average of 9.5 seeds per person.
Wow, nearly 10 seeds each. That adds up quickly across thousands of visitors, a subtle threat.
It really is. Then, over in the Netherlands, a medical first. An 83-year-old woman got a prosthetic titanium jawbone made using a 3D laser printer.
3D printed jawbone. Amazing.
Yeah. Restored her ability to eat, breathe, speak normally. And one more, from Germany. A study on a partial smoking ban in public places. They found hospital admissions for angina dropped by over 13%, and for heart attacks by over 8%, just within a year of the ban.
Clear health benefits there, so it really is a global snapshot of very different developments.
Exactly. Science, environment, social phenomena.
Speaking of science, let's talk about Brett Schenck. The magazine features his story, a retired environmental consultant. And it's this really interesting personal journey from studying ecology to developing a belief in a creator. What's fascinating here is seeing that evolution through a scientist's eyes.
It is. His background is relevant. Father was a mechanical engineer, fostered his love for math and science. He studied ecology, even learned some Koine Greek. Initially, Brett thought evolution and belief in God could coexist. He respected the Bible, but didn't see it as divinely inspired. you know.
Okay. Standard view for many, perhaps. What changed his mind?
Well, similar to the Troy story in a way, it involved interaction with Jehovah's Witnesses. They showed him specific Bible passages. And the point they made was that, while it's not a science text, it is scientifically accurate when it touches on such matters. As someone who used satellite photos in his work, he was really struck by ancient texts mentioning the circle of the earth, or God hanging the earth upon nothing.
Things written millennia before we could actually see the Earth from space.
Precisely. That accuracy, from his perspective, seemed remarkable for texts so old. It prompted him to look deeper.
So he started researching?
Yeah, he was encouraged to really investigate if the Bible harmonized with scientific facts. So he dove into evolution specifically. His conclusion was that while evolution tries to explain species' origins, for him, it didn't adequately explain the source of what he called the marvelously designed machines within cells, or complex organs.
The sheer complexity at the micro level.
Exactly. He shares this interesting, maybe slightly controversial anecdote about a zoology professor he knew. Apparently, this professor privately admitted he didn't really believe the standard evolutionary theories, but felt he couldn't say so publicly without risking his job.
That suggests some potential pressure within academia, perhaps.
That's what the anecdote implies, yeah. For Brett, his deep understanding of ecology actually reinforced his growing faith. He looked at the intricate connections flowers and bees, perfectly suited for each other, the amazing resilience of ecosystems, how they bounce back. His conclusion was powerful. The resilience of the entire system of life on Earth convinces me that life was designed by God.
So the evidence he saw in nature led him to design.
That was his interpretation, yes. And his motivation for becoming a witness and retiring early to focus on it was tied to environmental concern. He found hope in a Bible passage mentioned in the magazine, Revelation 11:18, which speaks of God bringing to ruin those ruining the earth. He wanted to share that hope.
It's a compelling story of how scientific observation and spiritual belief can intersect for some individuals.
Absolutely. It shows the path isn't always science versus faith. Sometimes, for people like Brett, one leads to the other.
Okay, from that deep dive into science and faith, let's take a virtual trip. The magazine visits Indonesia, describes it as this vast archipelago, 17,000 islands roughly, and the people, exceptionally friendly, patient, polite, hospitable. Sounds lovely.
It does paint a warm picture. It highlights some cultural specifics, too, like meals often eaten traditionally with fingers, sitting on a woven mat, and this unique musical instrument, the angklong. It's made of bamboo.
Yeah.
And here's the cool part. Each instrument plays only one note. You need a whole group cooperating to make a melody.
Oh, that's fascinating. A literal symbol of harmony and cooperation.
Isn't it? A beautiful metaphor. The article briefly touches on Indonesia's rich religious history, too. Influences from Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, and later Christendom weaving together.
A real melting pot.
Yeah. And it notes the presence of Jehovah's Witnesses there, over 22,000 at the time. It specifically mentions their efforts to reach the deaf community, highlighting a sign language event commemorating Jesus' death that drew over 500 attendees.
That's significant outreach. Okay, before we leave Indonesia, any fun facts? The magazine seems to like those.
It does. Here are a few. Indonesia apparently has around 20,000 plant species, the world's greatest variety of mammals, and not one, but two record-holding flowers. The world's largest flower, Rafflesia, about 3 feet across, and the world's tallest flower, the Titan arum, reaching up to 10 feet high.
Wow. Biggest and tallest flowers in the world. That's quite a claim to fame. Amazing biodiversity.
Incredible, isn't it?
All right, for our final section, let's bring it back to something universally relevant. Health. How does the magazine approach this topic from its viewpoint?
Well, it explains that the general perspective from the Bible, as interpreted by the witnesses, encourages taking care of your body. It's seen as a gift, basically. So it points out scriptures that condemn excesses like drunkenness or gluttony. And it even mentions that the ancient law code given to Israel included practical measures for disease control, hygiene, quarantine, even building safety.
So a basis for sensible health practices rooted in ancient texts.
That's the idea presented. Reasonable care is encouraged.
But then it tackles the big question. According to the Bible, why do we get sick in the first place if we're meant to care for ourselves?
Right. It contrasts its view with others like blaming sickness purely on evolution or on evil spirits. The explanation offered in the magazine traces sickness back to the original human rebellion against God, described in Genesis. The idea is that when Adam and Eve chose to disobey, they lost their perfection, became flawed, and passed that imperfection, including susceptibility to illness and death, down to all humans.
So inherited imperfection as the root cause of disease from that theological standpoint.
That's the core explanation given. Yes, we live in an imperfect system, essentially.
Okay, so if sickness is due to this inherent imperfection, what about seeking medical help? Does the Bible discourage that, according to this view?
That's a really important point they clarify. The answer is no, it does not discourage medical treatment.
Yeah.
Quite the opposite. It points out that there were physicians or healthcare practitioners back in Bible times. Luke, who wrote one of the Gospels, was a physician, and it quotes Jesus himself saying, "Persons in health do not need a physician, but the ailing do."
So a clear endorsement of seeking medical help when needed.
Yes, it presents seeking appropriate medical care as a sensible, practical, and biblically supported thing to do.
Are there any caveats mentioned? Any types of treatment that are discouraged?
There are. The magazine cautions against pursuing health at all costs, suggesting balance is needed, and it explicitly states disapproval of modern faith healing practices or any treatments that involve what it terms spiritistic or occult practices.
Okay, so mainstream evidence-based healthcare is fine, even encouraged, but not certain alternative or spiritualistic methods.
That seems to be the distinction they make, yes. The sensible approach, if healthcare is available, is to seek it promptly and appropriately.
And does it offer any future hope regarding health?
It does. That's a central theme.
Yeah.
It connects obeying God's principles now with a future promise found in the Bible. The hope presented is for eventual perfect health in a restored paradise on earth, citing scriptures like Isaiah 33.24, which says, "No resident will say, 'I am sick,'" and Revelation 21, promising a time when God will wipe away tears and death, mourning, pain will be no more, a future free from all suffering.
A very powerful hope for those who hold that belief.
Indeed, it frames current health struggles within a much larger, hopeful narrative.
One last little detail, it mentions QR codes being used in this 2013 magazine.
Yeah, just a small point, but interesting. Shows they were already blending traditional print with, early digital links back then, a way to quickly point readers to more online info.
Bridging the old and the new, even a decade ago. Okay, let's wrap this up.
Sounds good.
Wow. We really covered a lot of ground today, all from just one monthly magazine. It's kind of amazing, isn't it? We went from the really intense personal struggles of domestic violence and how words affect us
Yeah, the deep relationship stuff.
to surprising global news snippets, a scientist's very personal journey connecting ecology and faith.
Brett Shank's story, yeah.
A quick cultural tour of Indonesia, and then these profound perspectives on health, sickness, and hope for the future, all tied back to one specific viewpoint.
It really shows how much diverse material, how many different kinds of knowledge and perspective can be packed into an unexpected source. It's not just facts, but different ways of looking at these big, enduring human questions.
Absolutely. It wasn't just a religious tract. It was touching on sociology, science, global affairs, personal well-being.
A real cross-section. And I think this raises an important question for all of us, for you listening.
What's that?
Well, how often do we stick to our usual sources of information? Our go-to websites, our preferred news outlets? How might looking beyond those obvious or expected sources, maybe truly deep diving into something unfamiliar, something different, how might that reveal surprising connections, new insights, maybe even challenge our own assumptions about our lives or the world around us?
That's a great thought to end on. Challenge ourselves to look in unexpected places for knowledge. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.